The 2025 NFL season continues to bless us with bangers and very intriguing storylines. Another week down means the fantasy landscape has shifted yet again. In today's video, we will be discussing the biggest winners and losers from week 3. And yes, I'm rocking my Panthers jersey in this video because my boys were big winners this week, not only winning a game, but also shutting the Falcons out at home. So let's start on a positive note with a pair of winners, and those are Eagles star wide receivers A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith. They finally had big games this season. Both of them finished as top 10 PPR receivers in week 3 by totaling 20 plus points. This was a much needed game to keep both of these guys happy and to keep fantasy owners happy. There's going to be games throughout the season where Philly can't solely rely on their run game against tough opponents like we saw in week 3. And in those games, these two are going to explode. So look for some bigger games out of these two throughout the season. Speaking of explosions, Tre Tucker had the best game of his NFL career against Washington. His 40.9 PPR points not only landed him as a wide receiver 1 in week 3, but also the top player across every position in fantasy. In his third NFL season, he now has had 2 top 24 wide receiver finishes in 2 out of 3 weeks and is now the PPR wide receiver 2 in all of fantasy. Of course, that wide receiver 2 position is inflated from the recent monster game he just had, but he's no doubt at the top of waiver wire targets this week. It's going to be really interesting to see if he continues to impress as a potential breakout this season. On the topic of breakout seasons, Ricky Pearsall impressed as the Niners wide receiver 1. In week 3, he had 8 receptions for 117 yards, making some big plays when it mattered and putting up nearly 20 PPR points. He's currently top 5 in receiving yards in the entire NFL. I believe we're going to continue to see him separate himself as the Niners' top receiver throughout this season, and he can be trusted as a high-end flex or a borderline wide receiver 2 moving forward. On one last winner wide receiver is someone I touched on last week, but once again, Keenan Allen is truly back. I'm sorry I doubted you and called you washed prior to week 1. He's now finished as a top 18 PPR receiver each week this season, including 2 top 12 finishes. As long as Herbert and him continue to display this connection, he should continue to be a really strong fantasy performer. So now we need to pivot to some big name wide receivers who land in the loser category this week. And first up, we have CeeDee Lamb. It's not his fault that he's a week 3 loser. For some reason, the Cowboys decided to line him up at running back, and he suffered a high ankle sprain on that play. That's going to sideline him for at least 2 weeks. Now, 2 weeks this early in the season is not the end of the world for fantasy owners, but high ankle sprains do tend to linger, and there's always a chance that this is something that keeps him out for more than 2 games throughout this season. This is a major storyline to monitor for one of fantasy's biggest stars. Next up is Brian Thomas Jr. After finishing as the PPR wide receiver 4 in his rookie season, he has yet to even crack a weekly top 40 finish. It's very concerning for fantasy owners who have BTJ that he hasn't even put up 10 PPR points in a week, given that he was likely drafted to be your wide receiver 1. Through 3 weeks, this Jags offense does not look that bad, yet BTJ is mostly a fantasy non-factor. He leads the offense in targets, but is 5th in receptions on the team and has an alarming 28% catch rate, and T-Law has had a terrible pass rating when targeting BTJ. I'm going to continue to back the talent and production we did see last season, and my advice is going to continue to say buy low and don't panic. But if we see this for another week, or I'd say another 2 weeks, the concerns may be legit. And another early fantasy pick that's simply not producing on that level that he should be is Drake London. At least London has had 2 games of 10 or more points, but still as the Falcons' number 1 option, he's not producing at the level he was last season, in which he finished as the wide receiver 5. To make matters worse, Michael Penix did get absolutely violated by the Panthers defense in week 3, and that resulted in him getting benched for Kirk Cousins. Michael Penix has yet to throw a touchdown to any Falcons receivers or tight ends through 3 weeks, which is unreal. Unstable quarterback play is not going to bode well for Drake London, so this becomes a situation where we need to monitor what his quarterback situation is going to be like going forward, because he did have a hefty price tag entering drafts. Lad McConkey also lands as a week 3 loser. To be frank, I'm getting a little nervous about Lad's season. Through 3 weeks, Herbert and the Chargers have looked great, but just looking at the stats, you'd think McConkey is their wide receiver 3 rather than their wide receiver 1. He's the third highest targeted Charger wide receiver behind Keenan Allen and Quinton Johnston. And both those guys have had weekly top 10 PPR finishes this season, while Ladd hasn't even had a top 24 finish, and he was selected in the first 2 to 3 rounds of drafts. It's clear that there's a plethora of options in LA for Herbert, and that they don't need to run through Ladd McConkey to win games. And given how well oiled this offense is, he's bound to have some big weeks, especially in PPR, but I'm not confident he can be viewed as a weekly fantasy wide receiver 1 or even a high-end wide receiver 2 unless the script flips back in his favor soon. And then another week 3 wide receiver loser is Calvin Ridley. He's simply not startable in fantasy moving forward unless we see him and Cam Ward start building some major chemistry and he cleans up his game. He currently is tied for the second most drops this season and has only 8 catches on 21 targets, and his pass blocking has looked pretty lazy for the Titans. On top of that, rookie Alec Iomanor has been much more efficient with the opportunities he's had, and Ward is putting more of his trust in his fellow rookie than the veteran Calvin Ridley. And speaking of drops, Marvin Harrison is a week 3 loser for having 2 major drops. That could have been the difference in the Cardinals winning their week and you winning your fantasy matchup. His week 1 performance keeps him afloat through 3 weeks, but the drops this week were simply unacceptable. He needs to have a big bounce back game on Thursday Night Football. And then Mike Evans is also a loser this week, expected to miss 3 to 4 weeks with a hamstring injury, but this propels Emeka Egbuka even higher on list of weekly starting receivers. And taking a break from the losers, let's talk about a large group of winners, and that's any quarterback and any wide receiver playing the Dallas Cowboys this season. The Cowboys secondary is so trash and has been torched 3 straight weeks. The Cowboys defense has allowed the most passing yards per game in the league by a mile at 864 passing yards through 3 games, and along with the 5th most points allowed. In back-to-back weeks, the quarterback playing Dallas has finished as a top 2 fantasy quarterback, with both Russell Wilson and Caleb Williams posting career games, with their wide receivers also enjoying big weeks. If you have a quarterback or a fantasy relevant wide receiver playing Dallas, fire them up and reap the benefits. But one offense that might struggle against even the Cowboys defense is the Bengals offense, who all find themselves as week 3 losers. This was a terrible game for backup Jake Browning, as the Bengals lost 48-10 while committing 5 turnovers. Not all 5 turnovers were Browning's fault, but it's super sad to see all these great fantasy assets get absolutely nerfed without Joe Burrow. I don't imagine every outing is going to be this disastrous, but the ceilings of guys like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Chase Brown are certainly lowered moving forward. And then now some running backs who are big winners this week. We'll start with someone who's a winner due to a devastating injury to James Conner, and that is Trey Benson, who is now the RB1 in Arizona for the rest of the season. If he's available in your league for some reason, he is the #1 waiver wire target by far. Splurge your fab, make sure you get him whatever waiver wire format you guys use. It's not every week you can snag a running back who's going to garner more than 75% of the team's carries moving forward. Najee Harris also suffered a brutal season-ending injury, further staking a claim on Omarion Hampton's lead back responsibilities. But outside of Najee's injury, Hampton finally had a monster breakout type of week, finishing as a PPR running back 2 in week 3 with nearly 25 points. If you panicked on Hampton prior to this week, you simply don't know a ball. I'm sorry. But at least now you know he is legit and he is here to stay on this phenomenal Chargers offense. The running back injuries don't go away, as we saw Tyron Tracy suffer a shoulder injury during Sunday Night Football, and that paved the way for rookie Cam Skattebo to have a breakout performance. He carried the G-Men on his back in their week 3 loss, posting 24.1 PPR points. I was probably mistaken this offseason when I said Skattebo's game was not going to translate to the NFL level, because it certainly is, even on this bad Giants team. With Tracy out, he has a chance to fully take over as the Giants lead back and never look back. He's definitely worth starting in fantasy moving forward. Another rookie who balled was Quinshon Judkins. In only his second NFL game after barely practicing with the team this summer, he finishes a top 12 PPR running back in week 3. Even in a game where the Browns only managed to put up 1 touchdown and 13 points, he still performed at a really high level. With the usage he's seeing and the way he's performing, I'm confident in saying he can be viewed as an RB2 moving forward. And 2 winner backs I quickly want to touch on are Jordan Mason and Jonathan Taylor. Jordan Mason looked like a legit fantasy RB1 with Aaron Jones out. The Vikings won't be facing a defense as bad as Cincinnati's, and they definitely won't be putting up 40-plus points every week. But regardless, Mason needs to be locked into your lineup, and kudos to you if you did draft him. And then Jonathan Taylor has to be mentioned after the monster week he had, putting up 32.8 PPR points and finishing as the RB1 in week 3. Not only that, but he is also now the RB1 through 3 in all of fantasy through 3 weeks, with his Colts having a surprising 3-0 start. He's proven to be a league winner so far this season. So again, like Jordan Mason, if you drafted him, kudos to you. Our final winner from week 3 is Hunter Henry, who finished as the top tight end this week with 29 PPR points. There is not a clear alpha wide receiver for Drake May, and as long as that continues, Hunter Henry is going to be a very startable fantasy tight end 1. It's clear that Drake May has trust in Hunter Henry, considering he leads the Patriots in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. If you need a tight end and he's available on waivers, definitely pick him up. And our final loser from week 3 is CJ Stroud. Stroud's quarterback play is starting to get pretty concerning. I know this O-line is not the greatest by any means, but he does have weapons to throw the ball to, and he's simply not making those electric plays we saw him make as a rookie. It's getting to the point where we can't continue to put him high on a pedestal just because of his rookie season. He's currently not a fantasy starting option, but hopefully Nico Collins can continue to still have big games like he did in week 3. And that's a wrap on week 3's biggest winners and losers. Hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch y'all later. Peace.